Ladies and gentle frames, the Warframe Isleweaver update hype train keeps on giving again because this time we have a reveal of the new Jade Augment, which looks incredibly crazy and I have a lot of thoughts about it. So in this video, we're gonna go over everything on my mind. As always, big shout out to all our generous channel members and let's go. Now, first of all, I wanted to mention one thing. This video was probably, I would assume, uploaded on Twitter again by Warframe. However, I saw it in a post on Reddit that was made yesterday, so sorry that I get to it so late, but you know, I suffer from a severe case of living in Europe, so that tends to happen now and then. But let's now talk about the thing that you probably clicked on this video for, that being the new augment. This one's called Jade's Judgement, and it's an augment for her first skill, Light's Judgement, and what it does is pretty darn spicy. First of all, just in case you forgot what Jade's first ability even does, you're forgiven, I had to look it up myself. It creates an AoE on the ground where enemies take a little bit of damage over time and they become more vulnerable. Now, what the Light's Judgement augment does is, for every damage over time tick that enemies in this AoE take, they have a 5% chance to spawn a Jade Light Eximus, light beam over their head, which will then damage them for 3 seconds. As you can also see in the gameplay in the background, this can escalate pretty quickly. There are a lot of these Jade Lights on the field, and I think with the right build, you can make this absolutely broken strong. So now what I want to do is go over a couple ideas that I had in my mind that you definitely want to try out once this releases. The first thing I want to go over is the numbers on this mod. First of all, per damage over time tick a 5% chance to spawn this light. My question here is, does this scale with ability strength? If yes, then that could mean we will spawn even more of those, since the damage over time ticks happen pretty quickly. So if I'm thinking about a build with 200-300% strength, leading to 10-15% chance per tick to spawn one of these, that would be pretty spicy. Next question that I would have is, if you spawn a lot of them, could you even have multiple beams on the same enemy? That is something that we need to try out too. As for the 3-second duration, also here the question, is this set or does it scale with ability duration, which I think is very much possible, because if these Jade Light beams were to behave the same way that Eximus beams behave on us, then their damage would ramp up over time, and we all know how dangerous Jade Light Eximus can be if you stand still for just 1 second too long. So potentially, if more duration would lead to longer exposure to the Jade Light beam, this could mean some ridiculous damage numbers. Unfortunately, due to the fact that the video quality is pretty bad in the background, we can't really clearly see it, right? There's not one enemy in focus for the entire duration, so we can't really take a look at the damage numbers. However, one thing that I did spot is blue heat status procs, blue meaning the damage came from an ability. So what this looks like is that the Jade Light Eximus beam on the enemies actually also does inflict heat damage. The reason why this has to come from the Jade Light beam is pretty simple. I took a look at one of my old recordings and apparently the first ability does not inflict any heat. And then also her third ability, Open Him Eyes, was off, and this one also doesn't inflict any heat DOTs. So we can be pretty safe that these heat effects that we're seeing here are in fact coming from the Jade Light beam, and that is very nice because it means that very likely if we go for Archon Vitality, that means we can deal twice as many of them and deal some ridiculous damage over time, especially if we were to also use Heat Inherit to amp that up even more. Just imagine ramping up damage over time from the beam, doubled heat procs through Archon Vitality, and then in addition, all of this increased even further by Heat Inherit. But as crazy as this might sound, I have another little fun theory. Probably it's not gonna go anywhere, but it would be crazy fun if it did, and that is Summoner's Wrath and Arcane Kamisado. Hear me out for a moment here. I think the chance of this actually happening is pretty close to 0, but you can still hope, and maybe, potentially, hypothetically, through the magic of spaghetti code, could end up counting as summons. And if that were the case, oh boy, then this could be ridiculously broken. Again, not saying this will be the case, very likely not gonna happen, just saying it's a fun thought experiment that I'm definitely gonna try out. And the final question here, remember how her fourth ability, if you hit an enemy with that, also has a certain chance of creating one of these damage over time icons over the enemy heads that usually comes from the first ability? It would be interesting to know if this augment also gives you the chance of spawning a Jade Light XMS beam on top of those enemies, where this marker doesn't originate from the first ability, but rather from the fourth ability, given the fact that basically it's the same marker. Would be very nice if it did. But now, with all that being said, let's also quickly talk about if this new augment might change anything about your pre-existing Jade build, and I think overall it shouldn't do all too much, because on Jade right now we're already running a healthy mix of strength, range, and duration, right? Range for open MIs and also for your 1, duration naturally for ability duration, and strength for the damage, so it doesn't seem like the augment would change any of her requirements all too much. Then the whole Archon Vitality thing, I think is also something that a lot of you will probably have already used on her, because she can become quite tanky with the right build. So to decide whether you want to use this augment or not, probably just comes down to how much damage you can actually squeeze out of this. But if this were to be good, you might be able to subsume over her fourth ability, right? Throw away her Exalted and just use your first ability with the augment to deal all your ability damage that you previously did with your ult. If, however, you do want to use your ult, then another suggestion from my side would be to go for Arcane Hotshot, giving you up to 300% more crit chance if you deal heat damage with abilities. As we previously said, this requirement will be met with the Jade Light beams, inflicting the required heat DOT. Now, to be perfectly fair, the base crit chance of your Exalted weapon is pretty low with just 15%, so even though 300% would be a big buff, it might still a bit tough and you might want to go for Secondary Enervate instead. However, with the right build, it could be that Arcane Hotshot is just about enough, and that would then allow you to throw out Secondary Enervate and go for more damage in the Arcane slot, or maybe even Secondary Encumber that you could then, as we previously did in many different occasions, combine with Galvanized Shot to deal even more damage. Not saying that this is the optimal solution though, but once this augment releases, I will make sure to do some testing on my own and try to get a video out as soon as possible. As to which syndicate you will get it from, unfortunately, Jade doesn't have any augments just yet, so we can't tell, but just some personal suspicion here. I kind of feel like I haven't seen a lot of Cephalon Suda or Parent Sequence in the last couple of weeks, so my gut tells me there might be something with these two with the new augments being released, but you know, don't quote me on that, my guess is as good as yours. Now, if you haven't prepared for the Isleweaver update just yet, then don't miss this video right here. Tells you everything you need to know before it goes live. Another massive shout out to Niels V, Demon Lord Zell, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Nos Linux Gaming, Turtle Pier, Lycon Shepherd, On the Kanio 2, Pepper Wolf, Mihawky, Phil the Meme, Socrates the Almighty Rat, Leo Murasaki, Damon, Shadow Lockhart, Trolla Loxon, Kiski, Hantares, Patrasator, Christopher S. Mawson, and all other generous channel members for your continuous support. We see each other hopefully in the next one, and until then, as always, good loot and have a nice weekend.